Welcome to Trigger Warning with your host, Chris Brumbles. Are you tired of the professional liars of fake news and far-left radicals? Are you ready for truth and common sense? The insanity and divisiveness of political correctness and identity politics have no place here. So welcome to Trigger Warning, where free speech is free speech, not racism. There are no participation trophies, so if your mind is weak, grab your binky, head to your safe space. Consider this your trigger warning.
Good afternoon, Northwest Oregon, and welcome to this week's edition of Trigger Warning, the show that rejects political correctness and un-American left-wing ideology as we embrace truth, logic, common sense, natural rights, our Creator, and one of His greatest gifts, liberty. We have a great show for y'all today. After the break, we will be joined by Michael Hammond, Legislative Counsel for the only national gun group that has a no-compromise policy when protecting your rights, Gun Owners of America. I'm your host, Chris Brumbles, and I'm sure at least some of you know that I am the Columbia County Coordinator for Oregon Firearms Federation. And our founder, Kevin Sterrett, used to work for Gun Owners of America. So thankfully, when he started OFF, he brought no-compromise policy with him, as it truly makes absolutely no sense to compromise what is already yours, that you inherited from God and nature. So if you haven't done so already, I encourage you to go to OregonFirearms.org and sign up for our free alerts that will keep you informed of what's going on in Salem. As usual, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in Salem and in our nation's capital as the Democrat Party that has been taken over by some time ago by extreme radical Marxists, pushed to turn our state and our country into a third world nation and us into slaves. The only chance that Oregon has this year is for the Republican Senate to walk out and deny the Marxists a quorum. Otherwise, you will probably not recognize Oregon next year. The left is pushing to decriminalize criminals, legalize pimping, get rid of 3 prisons, empower children over their parents, raise your property taxes by 30 to 70%, $17 minimum wage that will finish off the businesses that haven't been killed by the scamdemic, handcuff police so that they can't do their job, turn some of the most law-abiding citizens into felons, outlaw diesel, and they have many more nefarious ideological goals. They truly are on a path to destroy small businesses, the middle class, and to make us all drink from the cup of sorrow. I encourage you all to take a minute out of your day, call and or email the Senate Minority Leader, Fred Girod. Tell him to walk out, deny the supermajority a quorum, and save Oregon. You can reach him at sen.fredgirod, that's Girod, at OregonLegislature.com. And his phone number is 503-986-1709. Let me repeat that one more time. His email is sen.fredgirod at OregonLegislature.org, and his phone number is 503-986-1709. Recently, I've talked some about the cancel culture that is sweeping our nation, but do y'all know how dangerous it is? Cancel culture is not a new thing. It's been around for many, many years in communist countries. It has made a resurgent here in the United States, and is here for the same reason that the communists use it: to shut people up and isolate them, to discredit opposition to their agenda, to reinvent whatever they want to reinvent, including history. When they canceled the President of the United States, as they did President Trump, there's a real problem. We are living in 1984. If you study history, you will learn that this cancel culture has always been used by future totalitarian regimes. The Nazis burned books, which is really what has been done to Dr. Seuss, just without the fire. The Chinese banned books under Mao, and as a matter of fact, they still do. Anything that has to do with Christianity, they will burn. Communists also destroy statues, and the Chinese did, and the Russians did too. Does it remind you of any group here in Oregon that is being allowed to violate the law at will? If you think that communism sounds like a good idea to you, I suggest that you do a bit of research. Every once in a while I hear a knucklehead say that communism looks good on paper, but history is written on paper and it don't look good. Communism killed hundreds of millions of people in peacetime alone in the 20th century. More people than all wars combined. And believe me, if we allow it to come here, many of us will be murdered. This is the main reason why it is so important to keep our guns. It's a whole lot harder to oppress people that are armed, and for sure a whole lot harder to wipe them out. When you hear about hate speech legislation, you need to stand up, speak up, and let your voice be heard, because there is no such thing as hate speech in a free society. Free speech protects unpopular speech, as popular speech does not need to be protected. Never let the government shut you up or take your guns. If either of these happen, we will cease to be a free nation, and the posterity of this nation will never even know what freedom was, because there won't even be books on the subject. They will have long ago been burned. There's a lot of people that I don't agree with, but I will fight to the end to let them speak. Throughout most of history, individual rights were not rights at all. They were privileges that were dictated to the people by whatever power that ruled them. But this country is special. Our country loved liberty so much that we were born of rebellion to ensure that we had liberty. Not just for ourselves, but for our children, their children. Think about all the people that died and have died since so that you could be free. There really is no greater love, and there is no better reason to die. When some of the world's greatest minds met and drafted our Constitution, some, like George Mason, insisted that our Constitution have a Bill of Rights to protect against future encroachments of an out-of-control government. Kind of like we are seeing today. Thomas Jefferson was in Paris at the time, but when he heard of the attempt to leave a Bill of Rights out of the Constitution, he wrote James Madison and said, "A Bill of Rights are what the people are entitled to against any government." You see, our founders were students of history, and English history was riddled with civil uprisings to fight for liberty. Major uprisings led to the 1100 Charter of Liberty, the 1250 Magna Carta, the 1628 Petition of Rights, the 1641 Grand Remonstrance, and in 1689 the English got their own Bill of Rights. Our Revolutionary War was just another war fought for liberty against a tyrannical government that had made many promises for over 700 years and kept reneging. So we separated from them completely. By the way, all these documents that I just mentioned contributed to something, at least in some way, to our Bill of Rights. There was something taken from each one of them. So don't ever let anybody tell you that the Constitution is a living, breathing, ever-changing document, because it actually took 700 years to write. So getting back to the Bill of Rights, James Madison, who was a member of the new House of Representatives, drew up the articles guaranteeing individual rights. 12 were submitted, but only 10 of them ended up being ratified. The Bill of Rights were passed by the House of Representatives on August 24th and by the Senate on September 25th, 1789. The Bill of Rights were later ratified by all the states and became the first 10 amendments to the Constitution on December 15th, 1791. The Bill of Rights are the cornerstone of our republic and have been around for a long time. Let me repeat myself when I say that many, many people have died to make sure that our Bill of Rights stays strong and protect our liberty. I don't think we should let a bunch of radical Marxist Fruit Loops in Washington, D.C. or Salem, Oregon extirpate them or destroy completely. The Bill of Rights is really a bill of limitations on government. They do not give us our rights. They actually prevent the government from treading on our rights. They chain them. I encourage you to read the Declaration of Independence and then read the Bill of Rights. All 30,000+ gun laws are illegal, every single one of them. And now they are coming after your guns and your freedom of speech. Some very wise words are written on the Washington, D.C. at the National Archives, and they are, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." Take those words to heart. After the break, we have Michael Hammond, Legislative Counsel for Gun Owners of America, coming on. So stay tuned. You are in for a real treat, I believe. We'll be back in a couple minutes with Trigger Warning.
Hello, all you triglets out there listening to Trigger Warning. This is where we reject political correctness and left-wing insanity, but instead, we embrace truth and common sense. You know, there is only one gun group in Oregon that will not compromise on your rights, and that is Oregon Firearms Federation. With all the trickery and evil bills that come from the supermajority in Salem, you need a friend who will keep you informed of these nefarious plans to plunder your rights. If you have not done so, don't delay. Go to OregonFirearms.org and sign up for the free alerts. It will cost you nothing, and you will get the truth on what's going on in Salem. There is absolutely no common sense in giving up your rights, so sign up for our email alerts, and if you want to donate, we won't complain, and it will be put to good use. Oregon Firearms Federation, the only no-compromise gun group in the state of Oregon, at OregonFirearms.org. Sign up today. Northwest Observer, another great news source that tells it like it is. Give it a try. I'm sure you will be impressed. It's time that we have truth in the news. So go to Northwest Observer and give Redoubt News a shot, and you have nothing to lose and only facts to gain. Now, back to Trigger Warning, where we reject political correctness and left-wing nut job policies, and we embrace truth and common sense. With your host, Chris Brumbles.
Welcome back, Columbia County. We have a very special guest today. We are privileged to have Michael Hammond of Gun Owners of America with us today. Hey, Mike, how's things going in Virginia?
They're very, very tough right now. How are things going there in Oregon?
I think that you probably know. We have a governor that we've tried to recall 7 times. We have Antifa, run around burning and breaking anything they want. There is no rule of law anymore. Got some crazy gun bills. I don't know if you heard about SB 554. They want to double your price for CHLs, and they want to make it so that just about anywhere you go, you can't use them. I don't know if you've heard anything about that or not yet.
Yeah. Well, is the Mark Hatfield Courthouse still standing?
I don't know. I avoid
How ironic that is.
Uh-huh.
That someone who, at the time, cared so little about law and order and cared so much about gun control would find his monument on the verge of being in cinders.
Oh yeah, it's crazy down there, and like I said, we have no rule of law anymore, unless you're a conservative, and then they'll lock you up for spitting on the sidewalk.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
well, yeah.
I was gonna ask you. I can't imagine people not knowing what Gun Owners of America is, but could you tell the folks a little bit about Gun Owners of America?
Gun Owners of America is a no-compromise Second Amendment group consisting about 2 million law-abiding gun owners who are coordinated to convey a message when bad legislation comes up in Congress or in the Oregon State House. We can send out an alert, and pursuant to that alert, up to 2 million people will respond with their calls and emails and letters in order to try to battle for our no-compromise Second Amendment position.
You know, our founder, I'm with Oregon Firearms Federation, and our founder, Kevin Sterrett, actually came from Gun Owners of America, and we have the same policy, no compromise. Really, I tell people there is no common sense in compromising on your rights that were given by God.
Yeah.
So,
well, my law professor once said the thing about common sense is it's not very common and doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And whenever anyone talks about common sense gun control, they're talking about how much of our rights they want to take away. And fortunately or unfortunately, we're now to the position where the compromisers have spent so much time trying to agree with reasonable common sense gun control that at this point we're at the end of the process where Joe Biden is proposing legislation which will literally allow the FBI to permanently cancel every gun purchased in America. That's H.R. 1446. You may not have heard a lot about it. Actually, Tom Cotton, the senator from Arkansas, asked Merrick Garland whether that bill would allow the FBI to basically kill all gun purchasers. Merrick Garland said he didn't know a whole lot about gun legislation, but he'd get back to them. And he's now the Attorney General of the United States. he did get back in a written response. He said, "I don't know anything about gun control legislation." Now, I didn't learn much about it in school, but the one thing I learned is that if you can't answer a question on an open book examination, there's something seriously wrong with that. And we now have an Attorney General who has committed, who has said that if Joe Biden wants to ban all guns, well, that's his right. He sees nothing wrong with that, and he will enforce that and stand up for its constitutionality. So we're now on the verge in which we could lose all firearms rights, and we've come at this just compromise by compromise. But at this point, I don't think we have any choice but to stand up and fight, because the alternative is we become California with a vengeance.
Yeah, and I tell you what, there are a lot of states fighting. I'll talk about that later. So I don't mean to. Well, let me back up here.
Okay.
You are the Legislative Council for Gun Owners of America, right?
Yes.
And what exactly is that?
That means that I basically am the strategist, the parliamentarian, the legislative analyst. When we have a bill that's introduced in the state or federal level, I look at it and say, here are the problems with it, and I suggest what position we will take. I've been legislative counsel to Gun Owners of America for 26 years. Before that, I was with the United States Senate for about 20 years. I was general counsel of the Senate Steering Committee, and I was the go-to guy for the gun movement when they wanted to get anything done in the Senate. And as a matter of fact, I was the manager on behalf of Senator James McClure of the McClure-Volkmer Firearms Owners Protection Act. And before you yell at me, no, I'm not responsible for the Hughes Amendment. They did that in the House.
Yeah. Well, before we go on and start talking about some of these bad bills, I'd like to talk about a couple good ones, if you don't mind, and see if y'all are behind them. Like HB 993, have you heard of that one?
No.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, Second Amendment Preservation Act.
Oh, you mean H.R.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was my mistake.
When you said B rather than R, I thought that you were talking about state legislation rather than federal legislation.
Right, and that was my bad.
No, that's something that we have we helped draft Marjorie Taylor Greene's legislation, and in fact, we have pushed similar sort of mirror image legislation in the states as well. It guarantees the right of Americans to exercise their Second Amendment rights, notwithstanding anything that Joe Biden chooses to do in terms of defining commonly used firearms as machine guns and trying to limit ammunition and trying to impose a national gun registry.
Well, you talked to Rob Taylor a week ago or something. I'm not sure.
Yes, I did.
And Rob Taylor and I have been working on. Well, we started in 2015. We pushed Second Amendment preservation ordinances, and what that did was make it illegal to enforce any gun laws after 2012 that were unconstitutional. I mean, they should all be unenforceable, and it made the sheriff the go-to guy for what was constitutional. The left didn't like that, so we came out with a Second Amendment sanctuary ordinance, which makes all gun laws illegal except for machine guns and felons. And we passed it in my county, both laws. And it has been big. I've noticed since we started, there's all these doggone, all over the country, unfortunately, they're doing resolutions. We're doing county ordinances.
Well, I drafted the template for Second Amendment sanctuary ordinances, and it was based on our discussions actually with people in Oregon. We drafted legislation. We said to the various counties, cities, municipalities, states, okay, here is something you can do. You can prohibit your town officials, your town officers, your state officials from enforcing any unconstitutional anti-gun laws which are promulgated at either the federal or the state level. And this is one thing which we are guaranteed is constitutional. The Supreme Court in the Prince case said, no, a state can't be forced to be turned into the regulatory arm of the federal government. That's wholly discretionary on behalf of the state. We drafted the template that has been adopted by over 1,000 counties, cities, states, in which his jurisdictions have said, no, you can, Joe Biden, you can enact whatever you want, and you can enforce your own lousy, unconstitutional, unlawful laws, because we're not going to do it for you.
Right.
And that's been a very, very successful movement. We have also drafted the Made in Montana, Made in Kansas ordinances, which say any firearm made wholly within a state and not crossing interstate lines cannot be regulated by the federal government. We were rebuffed by the Supreme Court on that, but the Supreme Court has upheld the capacity of states to say, you, Joe Biden, if you want to make these crazy, unconstitutional, third world cesspool laws, you're going to have to enforce them yourself.
Right. We've studied the anti-commandeering doctrine, which is, I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's about 7 Supreme Court cases that back nullification, basically.
Yeah.
And we know that Madison in Federalist 46 told us that nullification is a natural right of self-defense when you get out of the thing that gets me is, do these people...
And I agree with that, but let me say this.
Yes, sir.
We have had, in recent years, courts which have been filled up by the Clintons, the Carters, the Obamas, and even, in some cases, by the Bushes, which are filled with people who certainly don't respect old precedent, don't respect the Second Amendment, and don't even respect the Constitution. At this point, we have to try to craft stuff which we know is going to clear the Supreme Court, even though, frankly, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett have not lived up to what we expected them to. So we have to, at this point, take steps which we know the courts are going to sanction and endorse.
Yeah. Well, I've been calling these states. I've called Philip Van Cleves in Virginia. I've called Montana, Washington, Idaho, been to Idaho, and given speeches on this, trying to get them to pass this, at the county level, these say-sos, we call them.
In Virginia, I think we have adopted them in something like 92 out of 96 counties.
Yeah, the only problem I have is their resolutions. I want to see ordinances.
Well, like I say, we've said to people, whatever your jurisdiction it can pass and can live with.
Yes, sir.
And in some cases we have had ordinances. In some cases we have had criminal sanctions for disobedience. In some cases we've had civil sanctions. We push as far as the jurisdiction is willing to go. In some cases we're not completely happy with the result, but it is better than nothing.
Yeah, ours has a $2,000 fine for the officer and a $4,000 fine for their corporation they work for, and you can sue them. And so that's really what the left didn't like about it, that it had penalties. Otherwise, we'd have got even more passed. But really, what good is it if they don't have any teeth?
Well, it is some good if you can get the people fired, if you can sue them, if you can basically convince them that it's a violation of the law to enforce Biden's unconstitutional edicts. That's better than nothing. The stronger we can get, the more happy we are. If we can get criminal penalties for people who enforce these ordinances in violation of the Constitution, of their oath of office, then that's absolutely what we want.
Yes, sir, and I think that they should be able to go. And speaking of going, we got to take a break real quick, and we'll be back in about 2-3 minutes with Michael Hammond of Gun Owners America.
Hello, all you triglets out there listening to Trigger Warning. This is where we reject political correctness and left-wing insanity, but instead, we embrace truth and common sense. You know, there is only one gun group in Oregon that will not compromise on your rights, and that is Oregon Firearms Federation. With all the trickery and evil bills that come from the supermajority in Salem, you need a friend who will keep you informed of these nefarious plans to plunder your rights. If you have not done so, don't delay. Go to OregonFirearms.org and sign up for the free alerts. It will cost you nothing, and you will get the truth on what's going on in Salem. There is absolutely no common sense in giving up your rights, so sign up for our email alerts, and if you want to donate, we won't complain, and it will be put to good use. Oregon Firearms Federation, the only no-compromise gun group in the state of Oregon, at OregonFirearms.org. Sign up today. Northwest Observer, another great news source that tells it like it is. Give it a try. I'm sure you will be impressed. It's time that we have truth in the news. So go to Northwest Observer and give Redoubt News a shot, and you have nothing to lose and only facts to gain. Now, back to Trigger Warning, where we reject political correctness and left-wing nut job policies, and we embrace truth and common sense. With your host, Chris Brumbles.
Welcome back, Columbia County. We're talking with Michael Hammond of Gun Owners of America, and we were just now talking about some of the Second Amendment sanctuary ordinance and preservation ordinance going around the state. I really like the one that Missouri did. Have you read that one?
Yes. We absolutely have approved Missouri's approach. Missouri, of course, is a jurisdiction which is becoming increasingly red and increasingly pro-gun.
Yes.
And I think particularly their representation with Senator Josh Hawley indicate that that state has come a long way. I was born and raised in Kansas City, and when I was a resident of Missouri, I can say we were represented by two Democrat, not so conservative senators. But the state it's one of the states, so a lot of talking about how New Mexico and Colorado are moving to the left, but there are a number of states that are moving to the right, and Missouri is certainly one of them.
Well, we've got 18 constitutional carry states, and probably we'll have at least 2 more by the end of the year, and maybe get 6 this year, won't we?
Yeah, I think at the very least we expect Tennessee to come on. We're hoping that Indiana will come on.
Yes.
We could be at 24, and if we have anywhere from 40% to 50% of the states as a constitutional carry as having signed on to what I think has become the hallmark of Second Amendment legislation, I think that will make us very happy, and that will show a lot.
Do you ever have to rub elbows with any of these people in Washington?
Well, when I was with the Senate, I rubbed elbows with a lot of people in Washington. Some of them were actually decent people, despite the fact they were in the United States Senate. Others were sleazebags, and it probably is not fair to sleazebags to refer to them in those terms. I had a senator whom I won't name, but when we were negotiating McClure-Votmer, Orrin sat across the table from me and negotiated on behalf of the gun grabbers. And then he was running for president about 15 years later, had the nerve to go around the country saying what a champion of Second Amendment rights he was. And so I managed McClure-Votmer, and I said, well, Senator, you sat right across the table and argued for BATF's position. He says, yes, but I managed that bill in conference. And I said, Senator, there was no conference on that bill.
Yeah, well, excuse me. They're not
that ended his presidential career, incidentally, thankfully. And you're welcome, Oregon.
Yeah. I don't think they're known for telling the truth very much. So,
No.
So since you've been around these people, I got to ask you, does shall not or no or don't touch mean something different in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah. Yeah, shall not be infringed means, well, I mean, they don't even look at that. They say it's just the right of the militia. And incidentally, the guy who we just confirmed, and when I say we, I use the term charitably, to be Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, he, back when he was up for the Supreme Court of the United States, he was arguing, I'm really pro-gun. I wrote an article for USA Today under my own name saying that Merrick Garland had decided 4 Second Amendment cases. All 4 he had been horrible. The worst was Heller, in which he said the Second Amendment was nothing but the right of a governor to raise a militia. So you have, sitting as your Attorney General, with 40 Republican votes in the Senate, incidentally, a guy who doesn't believe the Second Amendment existed. Doesn't believe you can even get to the part shall not be infringed, because what you're not infringing, in his sense, is the right of the governors to raise a militia.
Well, so, everything is relative to these people. You know, you can be a woman tomorrow if you want to.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
So, do you believe that, I call him Beijing Zidane, because let's face it, he's playing for China, and you believe his pursuit of anti-gun bills is from a position of weakness? Because I kind of do.
Well, I mean, you can argue that. In the last 2 weeks, he is pushing, and the Democrats are pushing, for very solid anti-gun bills. The first, H.R. 8, is the National Gun Registry Bill. Virtually everyone in the country would have to undergo a background check, which means virtually everyone in the country would have to fill out a Form 4473. And we know that BATF has been photographing these and computerizing them
illegally
during its annual inspection. So everyone, just about everyone in the country would be on this National Gun Registry as a result of that. In addition, of course, the bill intends to create a situation which is so tricky for gun owners that their ability to go to prison for just minor deviations will be so significant that Joe Biden hopes no one will dare purchase a gun. Because if they do, they have this complex set of rules. Let me give you an example. Say you want to give your firearm to your son. You can do that. If you give your firearm to your son in exchange for his doing yard work, you're a criminal and he's a criminal. Let's say you want to show your firearm to your next-door neighbor by just handing it to him in your dining room. That's called transferring. You can do that, but if you leave the room to go to the bathroom, you're a criminal and your neighbor is a criminal.
Yeah.
So let's say you want to, you wake up in the middle of the night, you're living with your son-in-law who's in the next bedroom, you take your gun, you hear a noise, a banging around downstairs in your kitchen. You hand your firearm to your son-in-law, and you go down and look what happens. If it turns out to be a burglar, you're in luck. It turns out it's legal for you to hand the gun to your son-in-law to investigate a burglar. If it turns out to be a stray dog or a cat knocking over the pans, you're a criminal and your son-in-law is a criminal. Now, why would you create a system like that other than that you hate guns so badly you want to create this rubric whereby legitimate law-abiding gun owners trying to do the right thing sort of trip inadvertently over your language and end up being going to prison?
It's all about control.
Yeah, that's H.R. 8. H.R. 1446 I've discussed already. It allows the FBI to hold up your transaction. They claim that it can just hold it up 10 days, and then you have to petition the FBI, and then after 10 days, your seller can, if he wants to, sell the firearm to you, but doesn't have to. That's what they claim it does. we asked Merrick Garland about that. It turns out that if the FBI does what the City of Philadelphia does, and it says, okay, you need to petition us, we're going to require you to petition us in person. We are going to set up an appointment, but the newest appointment is going to be in 2022. Then that's exactly what Philadelphia did. That's exactly what Philadelphia did. At that point, the FBI can make every transaction, every firearm sale in America illegal. And like I say, if we hadn't had the experience of jurisdictions doing that, we wouldn't know it was the case. But one more thing, our good buddy Merrick Garland, Tom Cotton, the senator from Arkansas, asked him about that. He said, I have no idea whether legislation, which my boss is pushing, will bring to an end all firearms transactions. And frankly, he didn't care either. So those are two gun bills which we've had to fight, and they're trying to cave in the filibuster in the Senate so they can pass both of those things. The only thing standing behind those two bills and the law is the United States Senate and the filibuster in the United States Senate. That's why this filibuster is so important. And guess who the biggest malefactor, the biggest sleazy scumbag, the biggest third world piece of garbage currently pushing the filibuster is?
Probably Toomer? I don't know.
Jeff Merkley.
Oh.
You're senator from Oregon.
Hey, Mike, can I get you to move your mic down to your a little bit down a little bit? Yeah. Jeff Merkley. Yeah, the vampire. He's there. There is no good Oregon representation. Trust me, we know that. So
yeah.
So why we are? I read something that was kind of disturbing the other day. So we were putting all our hopes on Manchin, obviously.
Yeah.
He's proclaimed loudly into the public he will not break the filibuster. But then I was reading that Schumer is planning to stuff all this left-wing stuff into the reconciliation bill. It's illegal. They're only supposed to do that. I mean, because that just is a straight up and down vote. It doesn't require a filibuster. And what the article I was reading said he has threatened the parliamentarian to let him do it, or he was going to fire him. Is there any truth to that?
Fire her. Yes,
her.
It's a she. And that's been done before. Bill Frist, a Republican majority leader, fired Bob Dove in 2001 because he didn't give a satisfactory ruling. To her credit, the parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough has so far stood up to Schumer. The big precedent was the precedent on the minimum wage. If the minimum wage could be added to reconciliation, so can gun control. The minimum wage was knocked out under what's called the Byrd Rule. It was enacted in 1985 when I was in the Senate. And what the Byrd Rule says is you can't stick policy on the reconciliation bill. Now, for what it's worth, the news this morning was that Ben Cardin, the senator from Maryland, who I guess will be the chairman of the Infrastructure Committee, Environment and Public Works, said to Pete Buttigieg this morning that they were going to take the entire infrastructure bill and try to pass it through reconciliation, and who knows what they're going to tack onto that. Thus far, we've gotten some pretty good rulings on that. That was important. We threatened to come in and say, okay, if you want to vote on policy on reconciliation, we'll vote on policy. We will vote on withholding the salary of any representative who has sex with a spy from an enemy country of the United States.
That's funny.
If you want to vote on policy, we will vote on withholding the salary of any federal official, and I don't have anyone in particular in mind, who contributed money to set up a fund to bail out rioters and insurrectionists who were trashing America's major cities, including Portland, over the summer. And guess who that is?
Yes, we know.
And so we said, okay, if you wanna debate policy on the reconciliation bill, we have lots of things we would want to debate. And to her credit, perhaps as a result of our suggestions as to where this is going, the parliamentarian has thus far resisted it. We know they are going to try to take the second reconciliation bill they have this year and stick as much of this junk onto it as possible. We know that they'll probably try to make D.C. and Puerto Rico a state, pack the courts, ban semi-automatic firearms, in addition to creating election rules nationwide, which encourage ballot harvesting, which is like homeless people or political activists going from door to door in order to get blank ballots, which they can fill out on behalf of the party and deposit in a convenient lockbox, which is unguarded. We've seen where that leads with California. In California, during my lifetime, I worked for a Republican senator who was conservative from California in my lifetime. Now you don't even have a Republican running in most of the major races as a result of the jungle primary system. So the Republican Party is dead in California, and this happened in about 20 years, and it happened as a result of an amnesty bill which granted amnesty to 3 million Californians. And guess what's also on the floor this week?
Hey, Mike, can I hold that thought for just a minute? We got to take a real quick break, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
All right, we'll be right back with Michael Hammond.
Hello, all you triglets out there listening to Trigger Warning. This is where we reject political correctness and left-wing insanity, but instead, we embrace truth and common sense. You know, there is only one gun group in Oregon that will not compromise on your rights, and that is Oregon Firearms Federation. With all the trickery and evil bills that come from the supermajority in Salem, you need a friend who will keep you informed of these nefarious plans to plunder your rights. If you have not done so, don't delay. Go to OregonFirearms.org and sign up for the free alerts. It will cost you nothing, and you will get the truth on what's going on in Salem. There is absolutely no common sense in giving up your rights, so sign up for our email alerts, and if you want to donate, we won't complain, and it will be put to good use. Oregon Firearms Federation, the only no-compromise gun group in the state of Oregon, at OregonFirearms.org. Sign up today. Northwest Observer, another great news source that tells it like it is. Give it a try. I'm sure you will be impressed. It's time that we have truth in the news. So go to Northwest Observer and give Redoubt News a shot, and you have nothing to lose and only facts to gain. Now, back to Trigger Warning, where we reject political correctness and left-wing nut job policies, and we embrace truth and common sense. With your host, Chris Brumbles.
Welcome back, Columbia County. We're talking with Michael Hammond, the Legislative Counsel for Gun Owners of America. Do you want to finish your thought on what we were just talking about?
Oh, I was going to say that California was turned from a red state into a deep blue state by amnesty for 3 million illegals.
Yeah.
Currently on the House floor, probably Wednesday and Thursday of this week, are two pieces of legislation that would grant amnesty to at least 3 to 10 to 20 million illegals. And, of course, because of chain migration, once the kid gets amnesty, his entire family and their family and their family also gets amnesty. And it's clear what the intention is. The intention is to create an electorate which is so blue and so anti-gun and so pro-left that Republicans can never get elected in Washington again. I mean, the Second Amendment is dead. The first thing that will happen is civilian ownership of guns will be banned, and that is as a result of two pieces of legislation on the floor, which will, as I say, give amnesty to anywhere from 3.6 to 20 to 30 to 40 million illegals who are now pouring across our border, incidentally.
Yeah, we have it so bad here because Bloomberg came in and bought off our Senate, switched our Senate a few years ago and then got them the supermajority. It's so bad here that we've had to have the Republican Senate walk out the last 2 years, and we're trying to do it again, but the new minority leader doesn't want to. So we're going to recall him if he doesn't, because
yeah, I saw that. Congratulations. That seemed to work pretty well for you.
Well,
I mean, given the tools you had in your toolbox.
Right. If he doesn't walk out this year, I mean, Oregon's probably pretty much through. But I wanted to ask you two more about two bills. I'll ask them both at the same time because they're kind of similar. So I see that Feinstein is at it again.
Yeah.
And trying to make commonly owned firearms illegal to have. And then you go over to, and I don't know if you want to talk about them both at the same time, but H.R. 127, that seems to be the one everybody's scared about.
Yeah, okay. The Feinstein bill is basically a comprehensive semi-automatic ban. I think this year it'd take magazines with it. We saw what happened in Massachusetts. You had a standard semi-automatic ban, but the Attorney General, the lawless Democrat anti-gun Attorney General, said, well, this bill bans everything that's similar to the guns you're actually trying to ban in this legislation. So I think if the Feinstein bill, not only are AR-15s gone, but I think most of the firearms which are popular today among Americans are gone as well. California is also pushing legislation which would ban any handguns that didn't have smart gun technology. Now, my brother lived in Kansas City, woke up in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning. There was a drug dealer standing over his bed. And he reached for his nightstand, pulled out his handgun, stood the guy down until police arrived. No one got hurt. Had that been smart gun technology, had he had to put on his wristband, or alternatively grappled with the gun in order to identify the fingerprint scan provisions, then he would have been dead.
Yeah.
Let's face it, you don't have 20 seconds to figure out where your finger should be when some guy is pointing a gun at you. So he would have been dead. But that probably is going to follow very quickly if we get the comprehensive semi-automatic ban. The H.R. 127 similarly is comprehensive gun control, gun bans, gun registries, so on and so forth. I would caution people to keep their eye on the ball. Both of these bills, the Feinstein bill was up in 2013 and got 40 votes in a Senate controlled by Democrats.
Oh, wow.
My opinion is that neither the Feinstein bill nor H.R. 127 is going to pass in the form it is. Rather,
which one? I'm sorry.
Either the Feinstein bill nor H.R. 127.
Okay.
Neither of those going to pass in the way it is. And I hesitate to impugn anyone's integrity. I think in some cases 127 is being held up by organizations that want to raise money. If guns are banned, they will be banned because the bill, which has just passed the House by a virtual party line vote, H.R. 1446, is enacted into law. They destroy the filibuster, and the FBI uses its authority to stop all gun purchases.
Well, we know that those don't work. I mean, even during World War II, Hitler took the French guns, and only 10% or something like that complied under threat of death.
Yeah, well, and during the Irish Rebellion, basically gun ownership was a capital crime in Ireland. And I was talking on BBC maybe a couple of years ago, and I mentioned that to them. And I said to the BBC host, how'd that work out for you? And he said, well, he got out this quote. He said, well, the Prime Minister of Ireland has said the Americans are a bunch of cowboys who love guns and blah, 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 blah. I said, well, fortunately, they didn't feel that way back during the Irish Rebellion, or they'd still be answering to you.
Yeah. So do you think, I don't care if they're called a cowboy. I don't care. We're free. What?
Yeah.
And guess what? They will not get our guns, no matter what laws they pass, because they're all illegal. I've done enough study. I know that every gun law is illegal. So,
yeah, I agree with that. But I mean, you have to make sure that they don't enforce their illegal laws against you as well. So.
Well, I do believe that when they come to take our guns, the same thing will happen the last time they tried to take our guns.
I would hope so. My advice is that it is easier to fight now than it will be to fight then.
And I agree with that.
Winston Churchill had a quote, if you're not willing to fight when it's easy and the cost is small and the likelihood of victory is great, there will come a time in which you will have to fight in which victory is impossible and the cost is death. And nevertheless, we will fight because it's better to live as free men than to die as slaves.
I agree.
So, but I think we have to fight. We're at a crucible now. We have to fight as though the Senate filibuster and our ability to stop these unconstitutional gun laws is central, because if we don't, there's a danger that we will have to fight at a time in which victory is much less certain.
Yeah. I agree. So we probably only got time for about one more question. We only have like a minute and a half left. So
sure.
Do you think that the left is now trying to weaponize doctors?
Yes, they've been trying to do that for a while. We opposed the Obamacare bill in 2009 on for a series of reasons. One is that it mandated, as it was originally introduced, doctors to ask your 6-year-old kid, whether you had a gun or not, and then to put this information into a federal database. And as a result of that, we raised serious problems with respect to Obamacare. We succeeded in holding the thing up for a year and making it so toxic that in the end we were able to take the House of Representatives in 2010. So it's not a new problem, but it's certainly a problem which hasn't gone away.
Yeah, I do think that O'Ziden will be a lame duck in 2022. Hopefully.
I hope that we will be able to take the Senate and the House in 2022, and I have confidence that that's possible if we do the right thing for the next 2 years. And then we can breathe a lot easier.
Yeah, for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
So, would you like to wrap up by telling people how to go to Gun Owners of America? And I think they ought to go to your site. There's a lot of good stuff on that site.
Yeah, well, you can hear everything I've just said on the site.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, maybe some useful content. Our website is gunowners, GUNOWNERS.org.
Well, thank you very much, Mike, for being on today. I sure do appreciate it, and it's an honor for me to talk to you.
Oh, it's an honor for me. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you. And
thank you.
So that's our show for today, Columbia County. I want you to remember to keep Columbia County normal and sane. We don't want it turning into Portland, and we'll see you next week on Trigger Warning. God bless.
You've been listening to Trigger Warning with Chris Brumbles. You can email your comments to kohi.radio@gmail.com. And listen again next time for Trigger Warning with Chris Brumbles.